Jon Franklin. We're talking about the World Pro Ski Tour, and I just want to mention some names and just give me a short blurb on each of these individuals. Phil Mayer.
Well, Phil Mayer, as you know, Olympic silver medalist in Lake Placid 1980. People forget about that. They all think about Sarajevo in 1984, where he won the gold medal in the slalom the same day as his wife was giving birth back in America. Of course, followed by his brother Steve Mayer. Phil was born first, and Steve was following along ever since. And at the Olympics in Sarajevo in 1984, he followed him across the finish line and won a silver medal. So that was a great duo for the United States that year, along with Bill Johnson winning the gold medal in downhill and a few others. A really great Olympics for the Americans. Phil and Steve came back out of retirement to race the Pro Tour in the late 80s and early 90s. Phil ended up winning the slalom title one year, beat out Thomas Drakovnik at the last race of the season by about 200ths to win the title. And he raced a few races after that, came back a couple of times. But Steve actually raced the tour longer than Phil. He didn't have as much success on the tour, but stuck with it a little bit longer. So for a few years, you had the Mayer brothers racing on the World Pro Ski Tour, and it was pretty exciting time.
And your relationship to them was?
I was with IMG at the time,
yeah.
So I was their agent.
Okay.
Helped them with their contracts with Coors and
sponsorships,
American Airlines,
like that,
sponsorships and all that, and tried to help them figure out the best schedule and the best use of their times and find them other deals. And
gotcha.
They were racing GT cars at the time, sponsored also by Coors.
I remember that.
Yeah. So they were ski racing to not only support their families, but to support their car racing habit. And they still go out and do some car racing now.
Do they?
I know Steve tinkers around with it, and Phil now follows Steve on the tinkering around on the car racing.
Okay.
But they came out the last couple of years to the World Pro Ski Tour finals in Taos, New Mexico, and skied around with the current racers and skied around with some of the sponsors and guests of Taos. So they're still around on the ski tour, and having a good time with it. In fact, they were here last spring right before the race in Taos, and they were shooting baskets out here on my basketball court. So they're great water skiers and sportsmen of all types. They used to race motocross bikes and race cars and race skis, ski racers and all that. So competitive guys. I guess when you got your brother following along 1/100th of a second behind you, you got to try a little harder.
There you go. Bode Miller.
Bode, I met originally when he was like a 16-year-old ski racer. He was out in Europe, and we got him into a couple of bars that we were hanging out at. And later on, I was working with Barilla Pasta, and Barilla became Bode's major headgear sponsor for a few years. So we did a lot of promotions with Bode, including going up to his tennis camp up in New Hampshire and bringing Bode to the U.S. Open, where he got to play a set of tennis with John McEnroe. And you may not know this, but Bode was a New Hampshire State tennis champion as well. He grew up at a tennis camp. His family coached tennis players, and he was a coach or instructor there. So he's, in addition to being one of the best ski racers ever to come out of America, he's a great tennis player. So I got to stand there and watch him and film him, get a few games off John McEnroe at the Arthur Ashe Kids Day at the U.S. Open. So we've got to shoot video with Bode and ski around to his European ski races back in the day when he was winning the World Cup.
And I actually ski on Peak Skis, which is Bode Miller's.
Right on. So Bode took,
and I have his goggles.
Yeah. So Bode Revo goggles for a while, and now with Peak Skis, and they've also been a supporter of the World Pro Ski Tour. So we've got a lot of guys that work on the crew that love the Peak Skis and ski around on Peak Skis.
Billy Kidd.
Well, Billy Kidd obviously is the consummate ski legend. First American to win a medal in the Olympics, first male American to win a medal in the Olympics, 1964. Silver medal in the slalom with Jimmy Huga close behind with the bronze medal. They were part of that team that Bobby Eddy coached, and Bobby Eddy was original founder of World Pro Skiing. So a lot of these racers like Spider Savage and Billy Kidd and Terry and Tyler Palmer, who were on the U.S. ski team, Moose Barrows, and raced with Billy Kidd, and on the Bode Tour, ultimately came over to race pro. Billy tells the story of his first pro ski race. They held it over in Europe, and they kept battling back and forth in the finals. One guy would win one run, one guy would win another run, and they didn't have like a tiebreaker system. So ultimately, after going back up and down and head-to-head multiple times, he became the first World Pro Ski Champion, and it was the same year that he had won the World Pro Amateur title. So 1970, Billy was then and still is the only person to win the World FIS Championships and the World Pro Championships in the same season, and that was 1970. And then, of course, Billy's had his long and storied career as director of skiing up at Steamboat. He's been there, since the 70s right through until now. If you ever want to, ski with Billy Kidd, just head up to Steamboat, and he's still up there on the mountain enjoying the champagne powder and the sunshine.
I actually just saw a video on YouTube of he and Bob Beatty, and he skied up to Beatty and just covered him with powder.
Perfect.
But to see Billy coming down through that powder, wasn't trees, but to see him come down through that powder was just, it was beautiful.
Yeah, for 50 years doing the 1 o'clock run on Heavenly Days in Steamboat, Colorado, just a legendary, iconic moment in skiing. When you think about, if you're a skier and you've skied all over the world, what are some of the places that you've had to go and things you had to do? And certainly for many years, one of those things was ski Heavenly Days with Billy Kidd in Steamboat, Colorado, and the champagne powder. One of the bucket list items for skiers from all over the world.
We're going to skip right into what you've done in the past, and I know IMG Media you've mentioned, Glory Kickboxing you mentioned, and that seems like it's something that's close to your heart. And then Golden Gloves. You were the president of Golden Gloves, too.
Well, I ran Golden Gloves for a few years back in the early 2000s. I worked for IMG for 15 years, and IMG really was a country club sports business at that time. They were big in golf, big in skiing, big in tennis. They had a limited team sports representation business, but really golf, because the company had started with Mark McCormick and Arnold Palmer and Gary Player and Jack Nicklaus back in the 60s, and then jumped into Jean-Claude Keely in the late 60s, and most of the iconic tennis players of the world, at one point or another were represented by IMG, the Chris Everetts, the Martina Navratilova. So really it was a country club sports company, but I had a little bit of background in boxing, so anytime a boxing question would come up, I was probably the only person in the company that even knew how they kept score in boxing. So if there was a boxer looking for some representation in television or what have you, it would somehow filter down to me. But when I left IMG in 1999, after working mostly in the winter sports division, a little bit in tennis, I went to work for a boxing promotion company called America Presents. And America Presents was owned by Bill Daniels, who was one of the founders of cable television. And to get started, we signed David Reed in 1996, who was the only Olympic gold medalist coming out of the Atlanta Games for the Americans, gold medal middleweight or welterweight fighter, and fought him up through a big pay-per-view event with Felix Trinidad at Caesar's Palace in about maybe 99 or 2001. But what we did that we had the most notoriety for was we signed Mike Tyson for 5 fights. So we promoted the Mike Tyson fights from Francis Botha through Brian Nielsen for that era of Mike's career. And at the same time, we were promoting all the Sunday night fights on Fox television. So we had an ongoing televised series every Sunday night on Fox with a great stable of fighters. We had the Camachos. We had Frida Foreman, who was George Foreman's daughter. So we brought some women boxers in, which was very early on for that. And as part of that, my boss, Bill, who had been a Golden Gloves fighter, really wanted to bring Golden Gloves into the new era. So we took over the management of Golden Gloves for a couple of years. We even hired IMG as our licensing agent for the Golden Gloves brand. So the people at IMG joked that I was the only person that went from being an IMG employee to an IMG client. And I worked with the IMG guys for a number of years then. And then ultimately, when I had my own business a few years later, I worked with IMG again. on a boxing program called the World Series of Boxing that was being run out of the IMG European
remember
office. So, you know, I've been back and forth really in my career between skiing and combat sports, you know, over the course of multiple decades. But as part of that, I took over